Patriots are on. I'm waiting for the Patriots are on.
Oh, is that what it is?
I don't know.
Make it quick.
I don't know. He's antsy to go. So.
Is it the Miami game tonight?
That's not my reason.
I don't know. Are they home? I have no idea.
I know it when I see it on TV. I don't know.
Yeah, same here.
Who? Oh, great.
I'm messing my plans. Go to bed early tonight.
I know, right?
What time is the game on?
I have no idea. I'm guessing 8. Oh, gosh.
Good evening. The open meeting law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Therefore, please be aware that an audio and visual recording of this meeting is being made and broadcast by Boston City TV, which is part of the City of Boston Office of Cable Communication.
Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We'll start with introductions. I'm Carl Richardson. I am the interim chair, and I'm from the neighborhood of Brighton Center. And to my left,
Hi, I'm Eugene Gloss, and I'm from Hyde Park.
Kyle Robidoux from the South End, Lower Roxbury neighborhood.
Felicia Battles Birdsong, Dorchester.
Disty Alpha, Mission Hill, Boston.
Zaria Amin Hosseini, South Boston.
and to my right.
Hi, I'm Kristen McCosh, the Disability Commissioner for the City of Boston.
Great, thank you. Next, I'd like to approve the minute for the month of October. Do I hear any motions?
I motion them.
Go for it.
I motion
Any
them.
second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes carry it. Minutes are approved. Thank you. Next, we have the Meinea cast redesign. Forgive me for mispronouncing that. And we have Matthew Jasmine from the firm of Howard, Stein and Hudson to talk about that.
Thank you very much. My name is Matthew Jasmine. I work for the design consultant Howard Stein Hudson for the City of Boston. So today I'm going to be talking about the reconstruction of Meinea Boulevard project. So we're going to cover a couple of different things. First, where the project is, what's the project location, our general purpose, why we're actually doing this project, our scope of work, where we are in the design process, and what the overall plan is to get us from today's 25% design to construction. So our project, the project scope extends from Columbus Avenue all the way to Massachusetts Avenue. It is about a mile long. It covers a couple different significant neighborhoods within the City of Boston, the South End as well as Roxbury. It's mixed use all throughout the corridor. It abuts neighborhoods, commercial areas, shopping centers, and workplaces. So I'm going to go through a couple different images of what the corridor looks like today. On the north side of the corridor, there's the South Bay Harbor Trail, so that serves as a bike path that extends for the full length of the corridor of Meinea Boulevard. As you can see, the condition of the bike path is from fair to poor condition. There's several areas where the pavement is degrading, where you have root uplift, so it's really not to the condition where it's safe or comfortable for our users to actually use it. On both sides of the corridor, you have a 7-foot sidewalk, so it's cement concrete sidewalk. It runs for the full length, and it accommodates access to residential areas, as well as bus stops, as well as a connection to all of the bike path, the Southwest Corridor, as well as the South Bay Harbor Trail. So it's a little dim here, but I wanted to represent how pedestrians and bikes interact at all of our intersections currently. So currently there's an undefined mixing area, which means that there's just a wide open area where both pedestrians and bicyclists need to mix. So there's no separate facilities for each of them once you need to actually cross the road. So cyclists need to act as a pedestrian, and pedestrians need to interact with cyclists crossing the street. This is another location right at Washington Street. So this is a very well-used intersection with two major roads, Meinea Boulevard and Washington Street. You have the Silver Line bus that connects right to this intersection, as well as other MBTA buses. So we went through some of the existing conditions. As I said, it's a principal arterial, so it carries a very significant volume of traffic along the roadway. But we also see bicycle traffic, pedestrians, we have heavy trucks, and we have public transit, which use the corridor of Meinea Boulevard. One of the distinctive features of the boulevard is that there's existing trees that line both sides of the corridor, which many of them are very large, mature trees, and one of our goals is to limit our impact to those that kind of resource to the community. So what is our purpose? We've had several meetings with the public, several different scoping meetings, planning meetings, and design charrettes with both advocates for transportation purposes as well as the community. So these are some of the goals that we came out with. So we want to change the character of Meinea Cass Boulevard. We want to make sure that it serves the regional traffic demand because it does connect vehicles coming from I-93 all the way to Columbus Avenue to Ruggles. And we also want to balance that with making it transformed into a neighborhood street. We know that there's residencies abutting this area, and we want to make sure that everyone can access anywhere where they need to as easily and safely as they can. We want to balance all of our stakeholder goals. So we know that there's all different types of land use. We want to make sure that everybody has a stake and an equal share into this reconstruction. And it needs to provide a gateway to the Roxbury and South End neighborhoods. So to do this, we plan to implement multiple traffic calming treatments, which just means we're trying to slow down traffic so the interaction between all of our users and vehicles is as safe as possible. We want to make sure we have facilities for both cyclists on the north and south sides of the corridor. Right now, there's only the South Bay Harbor Trail on one side of the corridor, and we're trying to balance that facility. We want to make sure that we're investing in climate change. We want to plant as many trees as possible, enhance stormwater management techniques, and overall maintain the existing impervious surface area. And then we're going to upgrade all of our traffic signal equipment and set the stage for economic growth. So this is a rendering of just an example of accommodating for different facilities or different modes of traffic, meaning cyclists, pedestrians, and motorists, just within one single corridor. So that's the ultimate goal that we're trying to get to with this project. Some of the particular treatments which we plan to implement is we want to remove barriers. As I said, we want to focus on traffic calming. We want to make sure that places like the Orchard Garden School have safe access and you have enough area where you can actually congregate outside of the school safely. As I said, we want to invest in landscape and streetscaping and focus on what we call complete streets. So making sure that all of our facilities are separated bike lanes and our sidewalks are up to a width that safely accommodates, more than just one person walking down the side of the street. And we want to make sure that all of our accommodations are ADA and AAB accessible. To add on to that, one of our other stakeholders is access for first responders. It connects, several different medical communities as well as neighborhoods. We need to make sure that there's clear space for any ambulances or any type of first response, fire department, police can get to where they need to go safely. Specifically for our changes, we are trying to shorten the pedestrian crossings. That's something that the community really advocated for, is right now some of the crossings are way too long. They don't feel like they have enough time to cross the street. They feel that they're too exposed crossing the street, which is the truth. So that's one of our goals for this design. Particularly, we want to make sure that there's a buffer between cyclists and pedestrians as well. We don't want any overtracking of a cyclist going into a sidewalk or vice versa. We want to make sure that it's clear for every one of our users where they should be so they can navigate through the corridor safely. This is one of the renderings of one of our intersections and how we plan to do increase visibility and potential traffic calming throughout the corridor. So this is right next to the Orchard Garden School, which is at Albany Street. So this illustration is showing a separation of the separated bike lane, which is in a dark green. I apologize that it's a little difficult to see, but a separation between the separated bike lane, which services cyclists, and the sidewalk, as well as a ramping that happens for vehicles as they approach the intersection. So in this case, we're raising the actual crossings for both the pedestrians and cyclists as they cross the intersection to increase visibility for anybody trying to cross both Meinea Cass Boulevard as well as Albany Street. And we're implementing this treatment here because vehicles are coming down I-93. We want to give them clear visual cue that they're coming into a different type of facility. We want to make sure that they understand that this is a different type of street. It's not just an extension of the I-93 connector that connects Mass Ave to I-93. These are the locations of the actual ramps. So vehicles will experience a moderate upward slope as they approach the intersection. And that'll give them a visual cue that they are in a different area. The second location where we plan to do a raised intersection is at Washington Street. That's corresponding to that street level view that we saw before. We know that there's all different modes that use this area. And it also provides a connection to one of the highest pedestrian generators in the corridor, which is Tropical Foods, the supermarket. So how do we also improve safety? So at all of our different intersections, we're implementing what's called a protected intersection. And all of that is just providing a separate space for both pedestrians and cyclists to wait before they cross the street. So there is a raised buffer between both the pedestrian waiting area and the waiting area for cyclists. We're putting all of the necessary traffic control equipment, so signal equipment for both pedestrians and bikes. Still, you'll have the countdown signals for pedestrians so they know exactly how much time they have to cross and when they can cross safely. One of the outlines that you'll see in this image is that we are decreasing the turning radius to try to force vehicles to slow down as they're making their turning movements. So if they're slowing down making their turning movements, it's much more likely that they're going to be able to stop or see a pedestrian who's in the crosswalk. This is a close-up view of that image. It still just shows the separation between cyclists and pedestrians. One of the other locations where we're trying to implement traffic calming is at the Tremont and Meinea Cass intersection. Right now, as you might be aware, you might not, there is a semi-high-speed slip lane. So as you're coming from Tremont northbound and going to Meinea Cass eastbound, you have a free movement which allows you to travel up to 35, 40 miles an hour while you still have that pedestrian crossing that crosses that slip lane. So we want to make sure that that movement is much slower than it is today, so that that crossing is much safer for pedestrians, as well as indicating to the motorists that the corridor of Meinea Cass Boulevard should be a slower traveled corridor for passenger vehicles.
I have a question. So are they going to lower the speed on the street?
Right, so throughout the city of Boston, they're trying to encourage or force the regulatory speed of 25 miles per hour. So that's what we're designing to, is trying to make the geometry and implement traffic calming techniques to encourage people to go at that 25 miles per hour.
Okay, so I just have one other question from a slide.
Sure.
The Washington Street, Meinea Cass, that's going into the Dudley Square area.
Correct.
Where that area is there's the Dudley Station here where the buses come in. It's a pretty high traffic area, and it's really congested at certain times of day. Whereas Meinea Cass, especially when they're tropical, that again high traffic area. My concern is that when the raised bumps that are there, I've been on them when you're going slow in a residential area, but when traffic is there, I mean, what is that? I just have a feeling that might not fare well. I just feel like, buses coming through there, not that they're speeding, but again, because of the traffic load, what will that look like in terms of trying to get over them? And then again, how many cars will speed up and...
Right, that's a great question, and that's something that we've had to coordinate with all our different stakeholders, the MBTA, first responders, and BTD, to ensure that they were comfortable with the geometry changes that we're providing. And we are running all of our signalized intersections through traffic analysis to see what type of queues we have, to see how much delay we have, and we're trying to balance that with improving the access for our other modes, pedestrians and cyclists.
But to her question, the raised kind of elevation coming into the intersection, it's not as dramatic as, say, a speed bump that's off a main road in, say, Jamaica Plain, right?
That's a great point.
Right. So I think that's
One of the
I know they're like on a little glide up, and you go over and you go down. They're not high, but even the ones I've been on, if you're semi-speeding, you get a little bounce, you get a little, and I'm just concerned that might be issues later on for drivers.
Sure.
In their car, so we might have that issue. So how that might be something that may be addressed.
Right, and that's a great point. Is one of the things when we were approaching this design is we wanted to make it, significant enough so that you knew you were, impacted by some type of change to slow you down, but not so impactful that it might be causing a safety hazard. Boston Department of Public Works still needs to maintain, all these areas. We need to run it through them. Our current design, as opposed to doing the normal 6-inch rise over 6 feet, which is the normal geometry for a raised crossing or a tabled crossing, is we're proposing a 3-inch rise over 10 feet. So it's much slighter. The slope is less dramatic, but we do want to have an actual effect, by that raised crossing.
One other question I mentioned earlier about the traffic going through Dudley. So Dudley is being revamped. There's a lot of new businesses coming in. There's actually another grocery store coming onto Washington Street, Daily Table. So there's going to be an influx of other cars coming in. So as you factored in the geometry of the traffic, so are we including like in another year in the additional cars that will be coming through and what that traffic will look like? Because again, that is a small stretch of land going through, but it can get completely congested, especially because there's a MBTA station at the end. So have they factored in that issue as well?
Definitely, any type of traffic analysis that we do needs to project for increased traffic volumes based on the development that's happening around. If that development is fairly new, that's something that we'll need to take back to our office and make sure that any projections or increased traffic volume projections go into the model, and we can evaluate how each intersection will operate. Okay. But thank you for that question.
Also, for me, a question to Ducia. On one of your slides, I had a concern. One of your very first slides.
Sure. Should I run through the rest?
Please, yes. No,
We'll do
very first
Ducia's
one.
question, then you can finish the
Okay.
presentation.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, right. No,
This
go
one?
next. Yes, here. I just have difficulties. I see because I see 2 people on the bikes, but is there also space for wheelchairs? I don't know. Maybe is that the place where people on wheelchairs can, or?
Right. So this isn't a rendering of this exact project.
Yeah.
But it is a rendering of just illustrating accommodating for different modes. So you have the pedestrian zone to the left of the screen, and then you have a separate area specifically for bikes.
Okay.
But for Ducia's point, it might be nice if you added a wheelchair for the renderings.
Sure,
Just to
yes.
put that in, I think that would
See
be
what it looks
helpful.
like, yeah.
It does seem very crowded.
How are the bikers, you said that the bikers and the pedestrians are gonna be separated. What, is there gonna be a curb, or how are you?
Right, let me go to one of my close-ups. So within the segment between each block, we'll have some type of landscape buffer or some type of buffer, which will be between 2 to maybe 8 feet. So you might have tree plantings in between that segment, which will separate both pedestrians and bikes. Once you get to the intersection, you'll have a grade differential. So you'll either have an island, which would be a vertical granite curb with cement concrete in between it, and then a vertical granite curb adjacent to the other
With tactile strips, so that people know that they're coming up to a curb to cross?
Right, any crossing of a separated bike lane will have a tactile warning panel, just so you're clearly indicated that you're crossing over a bike lane. And the same thing going to the street edge. So one of the points of the implementation of the separated bike lanes is we're proposing a single direction for each separated bike lane. So as of now, the South Bay Harbor Trail runs along the north side and is a bi-directional bike path. And we're trying to separate it to be a single direction. So on the north side, it'll go to the west, and on the south side, it'll go to the east, limiting the number of potential conflicts between pedestrians and cyclists and improving the safety for crossing each of our side streets and Meinea Boulevard. One of the things that is different, what we're proposing than in this image in particular, is that separation that Carl, I believe you had directly asked about. So this image, you don't see any vertical separation. There's no type of planting strip in between the pedestrian area and the separated bike lane. In our proposed design, you'll have either a grade differential or some type of buffer that's going to discourage any over-tracking or mixing of modes. All on the corridor, we're implementing, enhancing all of our transit stops. So we'll have tactile panels for pedestrians crossing over a separated bike lane to the actual transit stop. There'll be plenty of room for accessible alighting and so getting on and getting off of the actual bus itself. We're following all the MBTA guidelines for all of the zones to allow the bus to fully drop off and pick up all of our different users or potential users. So this slide kind of just goes into some of our other scope for investing into landscaping and stormwater management. These are some of the opportunities which we're trying to meet with our project goals. Is we really, throughout this whole process, we've had to balance our stakeholder needs. So there's a lot of people that use this corridor. We want to make sure that the end product is something that everyone can use safely and get to where they need to be efficiently. And then our milestones. So there's a couple different action items and points that we need to check off so we can actually get to construction. Right now, we're at the 25% design stage. So next up, most likely in early 2019, we're planning to have the design public hearing. So we welcome you all to come to give public comment,
Do you mean
ask questions.
2018?
Sorry, excuse me, 2018.
I was going to say, that's the ways
Sorry.
off.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yes.
And I appreciate it. So early 2018, and we welcome all of you to come out and make comment or ask questions. So that's all I have today. I'm open to any questions you have.
I'd just like to add, from the city's perspective, my architectural access staff has been very involved in this design. So she brings all the accessibility issues to the table at every meeting. And the city's been really good about working with us on issues too. But if there are things we haven't thought of, that's why we wanted to bring it to you to get your point of view. So please, you're welcome to give input.
So because I want to be mindful of Mr. Jasmine's time and the fact that he may not be here when we get to public input, does anybody from the public, only as with regard to this project, have any questions for him while he's here?
We have one.
Two.
Two.
Yeah, three. Can you walk over
Walk
to
to
the
the
podium?
microphone and state your name and your question.
Hi there. Good evening, everybody. My name is David Vieira. I'm from Hyde Park, and I understand the city's desire to improve the city's outlook for bikes, because I used to ride a bike a lot and had some problems, but I didn't hear anything about bike racks. I'm sure many of us experience bikes that are chained up in inappropriate places that get people hung up. And one of the reasons why bikers do that is because there are not sufficient bike racks for them to legally put their gear away safely and lock it up for themselves. So I'd like to see what we're doing about bike racks, please.
Thank you, that's a great question. So we definitely realize that if we're going to be promoting, additional bike movements, we need to provide the amenities which actually allow an improved condition for cyclists as well as pedestrians. So we do have several locations. We are proposing bike racks, and it'll be to the city standard, and that's something that will continue to evolve and will be refined as we go along. But we are proposing bike racks all on the corridor at strategic points to make sure that where we are proposing them, they're not within the pedestrian path of travel or inhibiting any movements.
And there are existing bike racks on the corner of Washington and Meinea Cass, right where the Silver Line bus station is, and then the hotel on Meinea Cass is required to install bike racks as well.
That is correct.
Anyone else? Yep. You can head up to the podium.
While they're heading up, can I just ask a design question? Is there still the proposed kind of middle traffic lane that's going to service either emergency vehicles or commercial plated vehicles? Not necessarily an HOV lane, but kind of something specific to the commercial and the Longwood medical area, shuttles and so forth?
No longer on Meinea Cass Boulevard is there any type of separate lane outside of the kind of existing footprint.
Awesome.
Thank you for your demonstration. My name is Mary Dennison. I live in the Back Bay. One of your pictures there that you're using just as a demo, I saw that the bike lane was smooth, but for the picture for where the people were walking, that sidewalk kind of looked rough, and I was wondering what the terrain was going to be, because in one of the pictures they made it look like it was cobblestone.
I noticed that too. The sidewalk looked like it was in pavers,
Yeah.
and the bike lane looked like a nice smooth asphalt.
Yeah.
Luckily, our department gets a lot of say on materials, so we always pay attention for things like that. But have materials been decided yet, Matthew?
Yeah, so we've worked directly with the Mayor's Commission for Persons with Disabilities, and through their guidance, all our pedestrian paths will be cement concrete. One of the inputs that we got from MassDOT is for us to consider whether we're doing saw-cut joints or the normal MassDOT standard, and that's to be determined. But for all the pedestrian access areas, there will be cement concrete.
You might want to update that graphic too for your presentation. It looked like it was small pavers, but if it's going to be city standard concrete, make them like at least 4x4 or 5x5.
Sure, absolutely, thank you.
More comments?
This will be the last question.
My name is Amanda Smart, and I was noticing on well, as you were going through the pictures, you mentioned something about, how are we gonna let the public that's driving know that the road is going up? Why can't you just put signs, or why can't you put signs up there to let them know that the ground raises? Like, is there a reason why you can't do that?
No, that's absolutely a great point. And that is something that we are doing within the design plans. It's just not shown on the renderings. For any different type of traffic, changing of the condition for traffic, you should be putting some type of messaging as well as pavement markings. And that's a great point, and that's something that we do have. Is it's either a raised crossing ahead or a raised intersection ahead, just to make sure we're indicating to drivers that there is a change of condition as well. But thank you for that point.
Carl, I just have one quick question.
No,
I know that you mentioned the greenery.
The commission can ask more questions.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, you're good.
I'm sorry. The greenery, you mentioned the trees. I saw on the panel that some of the trees that are uprooting. In that area of Washington and Meinea, that there's a bus yard there. And so just thinking of the quality of air that will be in there, are you going to remove trees or are you going to plant more?
Right, so based on any construction, reconstructing sidewalks, providing separated bike lanes on both sides, we do anticipate that there is going to be some impact to the trees. But to the slide where we're trying to, improve the resiliency of the corridor to climate change as well as enhance the overall environment, we're planning to plant at, right now it's up to about 200 net new trees.
Okay.
So even though there would be some tree impacts due to construction, we are trying to do a significant amount of new plantings for an investment. Thank you.
And can I ask, so I live I almost abut Meinea Cast. So my daughter and I walk to Orchard Garden School every morning along Meinea Cast, so I'm thrilled and very excited about this project. I do have a couple questions, though. Is there I know that you all put a lot of thought into the I assume the traffic flow and the quantity of traffic, but if there's any way to maybe not do a full-blown whatever it is you're doing to the intersection for Washington and Albany, but to do something maybe on a scaled-back version for Harrison Ave in Meinea Cast. It's not as high traffic, but I think what that creates is actually almost a speedway where cars fly down Harrison Ave because I think they can gain speed, whereas along Washington Street, they're kind of more stuck in traffic. And then also, can you just highlight, so one of the big issues, particularly with, my daughter who's in 4th grade and some of her friends who walk they're tiny little kids, right? So one of the things that comes up is as they're walking, let's say from Orchard Gardens towards Ruggles, and on the left-hand side, there's often cars, whether it be Harrison Ave, it almost creates two lanes. So the cars in the right lane often just on their own make a quick right-handed turn, sometimes into the kids. And that same situation happens along Washington and Meinea Cass, more so with the buses that are traveling up Meinea Cass, so like the 1, the 47, and the 8. So are there any design mechanisms currently or as proposed to kind of limit the ability or how quickly folks can make right-handed turns onto Washington Street or onto Meinea Cass?
Definitely. So let me just jump to a slide. So one of the things that we're trying to implement is reduce the turning radii that accommodates the turning movements for vehicles. So making it a sharper right-hand turn. So one that projects you further into the intersection and makes it so that motor vehicles or passenger vehicles have to navigate through that turn slowly. We still need to accommodate for bus movements as well as heavy trucks because a lot of our different side streets do accommodate large trucking. So we are proposing implementing what are called truck aprons. So a raised area which still allows a truck to make that turn, but still forces a passenger vehicle to make the turns more slowly.
And we have all the documents online. We can send them to you for more in-depth review, and we can keep in touch with updates.
Great, thank you.
That would be great.
Well, thank you, Matthew.
Thank you. So I'm going to leave a couple of cards right there. If you have any questions, feel free to email me.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is a presentation on fair housing, and forgive me ahead of time if I mispronounce the name. Danchin Shu?
Close enough.
Funny, I never knew they were the Meinea Cass, a street name in Meinea Cass.
Yes, Carl.
Yeah, while I'm trying to setting this up, just want to say, Mr. Richardson, you did a great job. It is my name.
You did a good job pronouncing her name. You did a good job pronouncing her name.
Okay, thank you.
Don't worry.
Well, I appreciate that because I was nervous. I called one of my colleagues over and said, make sure I how do I say this? And she worked with me on it. So
Yes, I appreciate that.
Danchin works in the office next door to us, the Fair Housing and Equity Office.
great.
Yes. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Danchin. I work with the Mayor's Office of Fair Housing and Disability. I'm sorry, too excited. Try that again. Mayor's Office of Fair Housing and Equity. So tonight, I'm here to briefly introduce you guys on what we do in the office and what we do conjuncturally with the Mayor's Mayor's Disability Task Force. So tonight from this presentation, we're gonna walk through the 3 points. The first one is advertising and outreach. So whenever there is a new development that comes up with affordable or income restricted housing opportunities, we require them to do certain amount of advertising and outreach to make sure that the access to the housing opportunities are extended. And the second part of my presentation is going to be the application process and lottery. Usually, what we know as a housing lottery is more like a randomization process that to prevent the housing selection process to be on the first come, first served base, which is not fair for most of the constituents in the city of Boston. Meanwhile, I'm gonna introduce the application process, which is basically where and when you'll be able to get the application to affordable and income restricted housing opportunities. And also I want to introduce you guys to the work we have done in conjunction with the Mayor's Disability Housing Task Force, and I'll get more to that later on. So first part is the advertising and outreach. Whenever there is a new opportunity comes up, the first thing we require the developer and their marketing agent to do is to do a certain amount of advertising, which includes the first thing is a newspaper. So they're required to post advertisement on at least one of the city's daily newspaper, which includes Boston Globe, Boston Herald, and Metro. And the second one is a neighborhood newspaper. Let's say if there is a new development coming up in South Boston area, they will be required to post at least one advertisement on South Boston Online or similar media that covers the same area. And more importantly, that's what we are trying to expand the access to the affordable and income-restricted housing opportunities to the person that are least likely to apply based on the most current U.S. Census data. The most current one at this point is from the 2010. And also we try to expand the outreach to the neighborhoods that's further away from where the development site is. Let's say if the development is in South Boston, we try to make the developer and their marketing agent to do advertisement and outreach in Austin and Brighton area, because people in that area have less access to information on housing opportunities in a different neighborhood in Boston. And the second part is the CDCs, which is the Community Development Centers, and the housing organizations. Here I want to point out that when there are units that are built out for persons with disabilities, including mobility and sensory, which further includes deaf, hard of hearing, or vision impairments, we require the marketing agent to do outreach to mass access. They are required to do a listing with mass access and send back the URL to us to prove that they have done this listing, so they get the words out there that in their development, their units that are built out for persons with disabilities. And the third part, which we highly recommend people to subscribe to, is the BPDA and Metrolist mailing blast. The first one is with the city's planning authority, which is the Boston Planning and Development Authority. They have a website and email blast that gets to people whenever there are new opportunities comes up. And the second one is with the Department of Neighborhood Development. We also send out the advertisement to them whenever we approve an advertisement for the housing opportunity. So these two are the city's media and venue to get the words out that we have new opportunities comes up. So if you would just Google Boston BPDA mailing list or Boston Metro list, you will find the access to the URL that will help you get to where to sign up for the email list. This is a really convenient way, and we tell every constituent that we met to sign up for these, because this is the best way to get to the most up-to-date information. And the fourth part is, because we're also trying to expand means on getting the words out. Sometimes newspapers just aren't efficient enough, because we've been hearing the words that nobody reads newspaper anymore. So we also ask the developers or their agent if they do the outreach on Facebook or Craigslist or maybe Twitter, or they have a project-specific website. There are several marketing companies, they develop website for each project that they're working on, and they get the website out, and that's also helpful. So if anyone here has any preference on getting such information, please let me know after this presentation, because we're also trying to expand the access. And so when the advertising period passed, the development and the projects just moved on to application process. During the application process, it includes a certain period that you will have the access to either paper or online application to the project that you desire to apply for. This period varies based on the development agency that the projects working with. For Boston Planning and Development Authority, this period is usually 2 to 4 weeks. But for the projects with Department of Neighborhood Development, it could be longer, it could be months. But you will have this information clearly delineated in the advertisement that you are going to be find both online and in the newspapers.
Can I just ask, are these applications to go into the lottery?
So that's something I'm going to explain more later.
Okay.
So once you fill out an application, everyone can apply. There is no one that's ineligible from lottery application. But if there are household that fill out more than one application, we'll advise the marketing agent to maybe pull out one of the application.
Okay, I'll let you get to it. Sorry, I jumped
Yes.
again.
No, it's so once you fill the application, if there's no duplicates and all the required information are properly filled out, you will be automatically entered into the lottery. But if maybe you miscommunicate with persons in your household and you accidentally submit to entirely same application, the marketing agent is required to reach out to you and communicate in that regard. And if somehow they deem you ineligible for the lottery, they'll also reach out to you and give you time to appeal or have more documentation that are ready for your eligibility. So go back to distribution period. During the distribution period, you have the access to application both in the distribution locations, which will be included in the advertisement. I can give you more detailed information at this point because they're project-specific informations, but all the determination on the period and location are approved by us, the office. So you'll have the time to access the application in paper, in person, or online on the city's URL, and which will be included in the advertisement as well. And the second one I want to get to is the preferences. The first one, which is more pertinent to what we're talking about tonight, is the preference for persons with disabilities. So I have consulted with your colleagues in the Disability Commission. So whenever there is a new development come up, I was informed that there are at least 5% of the unit that should be built out for person with disabilities, and 2% of the unit that should be built out for a person with sensory impairment, including deaf, hard of hearing, or vision impairment. So when those type of units are in our portfolio, the income restricted or affordable units of portfolio, they are required to have such preference for a person with the designated disability. In order to prove your preference for such eligibility, you need to have a documentation from the doctor that's treating you for this specific disability as a verification for your eligibility for such preference. You won't need this documentation at the time of your application, but you will need it after the lottery. So my advice here is to get this documentation prepared as soon as possible, but not too soon. When you just got the application, this is not in need, but you have to prove this information in the application for future. And the second one is Boston residency. When the development has only city's funding or land appropriation, there is 100% Boston residency preference. But everyone can apply, but you will only be ranked later than those people that live in Boston currently. And the third one is the household size. Sorry, totally forgot I have this. So the third one is the household size preference. There are two types of household size preferences. The first one is the minimum of 1 person per bedroom. That means if you're in the household of 1 person, a single person household, if you apply for 2 bedrooms, you won't be eligible for such preference. And the second one is, we don't usually see the second one as often, but it does exist, which is the number of person per bedroom -1, which means this gives people the expectation that they're going to grow their household in the future. So if you're a single person household, but you're applying for a development with such preference for a 2-bedroom, you're still going to be eligible. But another thing I want to keep you noted in this presentation is that for both categories above, if you have a disabilities-related equipment that needs more room, you may be qualified for an additional bedroom when you apply. Just let the marketing agent informed when you apply and make that clear.
Would that be for a person that needs an overnight PCA? Would they be eligible for a 2-bedroom as well?
we work on that on an individual basis.
Okay.
That's part of what my work with the Fair Housing and Equity Commission does, because that's actually come up before.
Okay.
Because many of the informations are project specific. So if you have any concern or questions when you're applying, just let the marketing agent know. And if they don't have a certain answer to your question, they will reach out to us.
Yeah, and definitely apply. I would say if you're interested at all, put your application in, and then we can work on those things afterwards.
Yeah, and we're actually trying to make this a lot easier, which I'll
Yes.
get to later. And back to the Boston residency, I have a list of the document that could approve your Boston residency eligibility. If you can prove at least 2 of the documents in this list, you will be able to be considered qualified for the Boston residency preference. And people usually get confused about the area median income. It's a confusing term, but what it actually means is the maximum income limits. So the government housing program qualify recipients and applicants based on their income. The benchmark used for determining the income eligibility is called the area median income. But what it actually means is the maximum income that's applied to this unit that you're applying for. What we usually see in the income restricted or affordable unit portfolio is the 30% area median income, 50%, 70%, and 100%. Sometimes the home ownership projects could go higher than 100%, and most of the time what we've seen with the Boston BPDA projects are 50% to 100% for the rental opportunity. And for the DND, it's usually 30% to 70%. When we say affordable income, affordable housing opportunity, usually what we mean is low, extremely, or very low income. And when we say income restricted, it's usually over 70%. When you see, I wanna say this at this point is because when people see the ads, they're confused about the rent or the price, because some people will consider it's not affordable, but this is the city's definition, and we're trying our really best to get the words out there and promote the accessibility to most of the cheaper rent and lower price units. I also have a handout tonight that has all the most up-to-date income limits that's published at this point. If you want to see your eligibility for the income, for the units that you're trying to apply for, that has most of the number ready. Let's say if you are a single-person household and you're looking for a 70% AMI development, that means as long as your income doesn't exceed $50 and $700 per year, and that's your annual income before taxes are taken out, then you're eligible. And the last one, but not least, I want to mention what we have been working with the Mayor's Commission for Persons with Disabilities on the Mayor's Disability Housing Task Force. So this is the collective of city agencies, which includes the ND and BPDA, the Mayor's Commission for Persons with Disabilities, and our Office for Fair Housing and Equity. So and we also include non-governmental agencies and organizations who work really close with constituents with disabilities for their valuable opinion and advice on our action. So the focus of this task force is to expand access to housing for persons with disabilities and to push back against discrimination throughout their process of seeking housing in the city of Boston, and also to increase transparency. What our office have been working with was that we have established a list of applicants who have applied for units that are built out for persons with disabilities, including mobility and sensory units, with the city since 2015. We already have this list ready. The reason we want this is because in the long run, we want to build out a potential rolling application pool, which means once you have applied for the city, with the city for an unit that's built out for person with disabilities, but didn't get a unit because maybe you didn't meet the preference, or you weren't ranked higher enough after the lottery, you will be automatically enrolled to the next opportunity that's coming up. However, we want to make this as convenient as it could be for the constituents, but we don't want to intrude anyone's privacy. That's why we're building a survey at this point to ask for interest and the best method to participate. So we're trying to build this survey and get it out at the beginning of next year. So if anyone here have any suggestion on this process and your idea on the rolling application pool, please let us know, and we'll try our best to accommodate. And those summarize very briefly, what we do with the Office of Fair Housing and Equity and the housing lottery in the city of Boston, including our work with the mayor's disability housing task force. So if you have any question, please let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the commission members?
Yes. Yes. Hello. My name is Ducia. While I was listening to you and I was looking at the board as well, I am. It's probably obvious, but I'm still confused. The only part I understood is that it's for people who are with disabilities, but I didn't quite catch. What about? Is this like is it like easier process than applying for Section 8 vouchers or whatever other programs are out there? Is like to make it easier for them, or what's the? I'm not sure what I'm trying to say, but is that like supposed to be easier for them, or what's the process?
You mean the housing application process for Section 8 voucher holder?
Yeah, for instance, for them or for those who don't have a Section 8 voucher, like can they also apply, or? I mean,
Yes.
Just as long as you have a disability, you're all set. Is that how that works?
So the application process is the same for everyone, with or without a Section 8. But the only difference could be that, because since I mentioned that there will be a maximum income limits while you apply to determine your income eligibility, there will also be a minimum that's set by the developer, and to make sure that the tenant is capable of paying the rent. But when people that are receiving housing assistance apply, the minimum doesn't apply on them.
Okay.
Yes, but the application process in general, from requiring an application to finish it up by the deadline, it should be the same. Yeah.
So I think she says we're talking about the lottery piece. When a person is applying for the lottery, a person has a disability,
Yes.
and they're applying for the lottery, they're doing the application, meeting the guidelines. Is that process easier than applying for Section 8 for the other housing subsidies? I think it's Metro and BHE. Those applications take years, after you submitted them, and you're on this tremendous waiting list. Is the process that you're talking about for these developments, is it easier to obtain housing, income housing that's affordable than it is to deal with the BHA piece?
I can tell you how long it usually takes for a applicant to fill out an application till they actually get a unit. It could take months, but we don't see the process take longer than several years. That never happened before.
There's such a shortage in Boston of housing, especially housing that's affordable. But like I said earlier, I would definitely encourage people to apply if you're interested, just because of the wait. And we're working really hard with the Fair Housing Office to try to simplify the process. And another thing that's coming out of the Disability Housing Task Force, we're kind of brainstorming on ways to make it easier for people. So with the preferences for disability and Boston residency, that will push people up higher on the list. And then we're also going to start doing, if people don't get selected for that particular development, keeping the names on a list and automatically submitting them for the next lotteries that come up, just so people don't have to keep refilling out applications. That's not happening yet, but that's something that we're working towards. So I think the whole picture of housing is confusing and expensive and timely, but like I said, we're trying to simplify the process, and there's a lot of development happening in Boston. So, reach out to us if you have questions, or if you no other people have questions. And one thing I was going to talk about in my report is I'd like to talk to the Director of Fair Housing and Equity, Janine Anzalata, to see if she will set up a training just in fair housing for people with disabilities, maybe in the spring.
Perfect.
Where we can do like applications and go over the whole process in depth, because it's a lot to take in 15 minutes.
Yes. And also,
I'm sorry, I just have a quick question. For developers who haven't started yet, but you know that they're going to be going up, do they have a responsibility if you're inquiring about accessible units? Do they have a responsibility to let you know when they're going to go up, when they're going to be available? I'm not talking about lottery. I'm just talking about general accessible units.
so as I mentioned, they're required to build for the rental opportunities. They're required to build 5% of the total unit for persons with mobility impairment and 2% of the total unit for persons with sensory impairment, which includes deaf, hard of hearing, and vision impairments. So how many of those units will be designated for affordable or income restricted units? It's a discussion that they're going to have with the developing authorities.
But there is a registry that captures all the accessible apartments, whether they're affordable or market rate, and it's under CHAPA. It's the Mass Access Registry. Every developer is required to list his accessible units in that, and we can mail you out the link. But that has all the apartments listed by access for any price range.
I know there's a development going up in Mass South Bay that hasn't started yet. I know that. But I've been inquiring a lot about it, and I haven't gotten any response from the developers. So I don't know if that's why I was asking if they're required to tell you.
Yeah, we can have a conversation offline about it. Like I said, we'll do a training in the spring because it is a lot to take in.
Yeah, it is. Yes. Thanks.
Yeah. And also, I want to point out that when you're filling out the application, if you think that you need more time, because any application that's submitted after deadline will be considered ineligible for lottery. But if you think you need more time to fill out this application, feel free to talk to the marketing agent, because they're required to make a reasonable accommodation throughout the whole application process.
Great,
thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Does anybody from the public specific to fair housing have any questions? No, good. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having
We
me.
look forward to hearing more from you guys maybe in the spring with the training.
Yeah, we're very looking forward to that, because we understand this is a complicated and long process, and
So I may be calling you because I'm in 2 out of 3 of the sensory hearing and vision. So
I left my email. I don't have a card, but I left my email.
We can
at the
send it
end
out.
of-
We'll
Great.
send out the contact.
So feel free to contact us if you have any questions.
Thank you.
That's your email.
Have a
there,
good
isn't it?
day.
Yes,
Good
that's my
night.
email. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are going to skip the interim chair's report tonight because I don't really have anything to add. And we're going to go straight to the commissioner's report.
All right, thank you, Carl. So it is December, and we are approaching the holidays, and we are past the election for 2017. And Mayor Walsh was reelected. I'm sure everybody heard, and he has also appointed a new Health and Human Services Cabinet Chief. Marty Martinez will be starting in January. He is from the mentoring world, and he's just starting to get acclimated off-site, but he'll be our new cabinet chief, and we're looking forward to working with him to really move the next administration forward in terms of accessibility and human services. So a few updates for the board. Did everybody get the list of meeting dates for 2018? It was attached in the email. It's going to be on the 4th Monday of every month. Is that right, Chris? 4th Monday? Okay. And 5:30 in the same room. So we're looking forward to a really productive year in 2018. We will hopefully have the next 6 board members appointed for January. And then we'd like to hold elections a few months after that, maybe March or April. And we also would like to encourage board members to really contact us with any ideas you have for trainings, anything you want more information on, anything that we can do to really broaden our expertise, whether it's trainings that you'd like to have or to broaden out, to make your influence known. Because I was talking to somebody from one of the city departments last week, and they were saying that when they get letters from the board, they take them really seriously. So your input really matters, and it would be great if you have strong feelings about whether it's a development or a program or a policy to weigh in on it. So like I said, if you have ideas for trainers, every meeting is going to have one development project and one speaker about a topic. If there's anything you're interested in, let us know and we can reach out and get a trainer for that. I'm also going to be setting up some trainings apart from the board meetings. A few years ago, we did a general training on ADA issues during an afternoon. So if there are anything, other topics that you'd like more in-depth training on, something like fair housing, please let me know. So then the updates I have from my office. First of all, the ramp at the Boston Public Library. The library applied for an ADA grant through the state. They have grants available through the Mass Office on Disability for ADA upgrades in municipalities. So they applied for that grant, and they're hoping to have it pay for a temporary ramp in front of the library at the main entrance. And even if they don't get the funding, they're still committed to installing the ramp, hopefully in early 2018. So that is a very positive development. They're also looking at long-term master plans to install a permanent ramp that meets the architectural and historical elements that need to be considered in any permanent work. But in my meetings with the library president and with the Landmarks Commission, they're all very enthusiastic about the project, very supportive of it. So we hope to have it done sooner rather than later.
I know that that's not a small task, so thank you for doing it.
Yeah, I was surprised that they were so receptive. Not that I expected them not to be, but they were all on the same team, so we're excited about that.
They're getting older.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that's what it is.
Yep. So another thing that we're working on, we're in the very beginning stages of, is looking at accessible hubway bicycles. That's a trend that is starting to happen around the country. Portland, Oregon has a program where they have an accessible bike. And accessible biking can be many different things. It could be a trike for people who have balance issues. It could be a recumbent bike. It could be something that you transfer into and hook up your wheelchair behind you. So we're just starting to have those conversations, and Spalding is involved, and some other advocates from the community, some bicycle advocates. So we're hoping to put some thoughts together and come up with a suggestion for a product sometime in the spring. Another thing that we're working on is we've been working with 2 companies who do autonomous vehicles. They are currently testing them in the Seaport. And I know I had gotten some names of people to do some user testing, and the companies are also looking for any input on design and consideration of what people need in an autonomous vehicle. And I know I had thrown out some names for people on this committee, and I'm wondering, did anybody hear from the companies or have anything to share?
I made an appointment, but then I had to cancel due to my daughter's soccer game being rescheduled for the same time. But they were super responsive. We had a good offline conversation, and they were very thorough and nice to work with.
Great. And I know that that was one company. We have another company that we're going to be recommending names for too. So if anyone's interested, right now they're looking at sensory disabilities. We did have an in-depth conversation with them about wheelchair access because we missed out on Uber in the early, we didn't miss, they missed us, but so we're trying to work on things about like what type of vehicle they could use. They have a meeting with a manufacturer coming up this week in Detroit, I believe. So they're thinking about it, and they're really trying to be proactive about developing a vehicle that people in wheelchairs can use. On that front, we're also working with Uber to try to incorporate the city's taxis that are accessible into the Uber pool. So we'll be meeting on that with the Wave owners in the next few weeks. And also, did everybody hear about the new law that was passed for fraud of disabled placards?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they've made it a criminal offense now to use a placard fraudulently. And they've raised the fines, and they can also take away your license for a period of time.
Wow.
Do you have any information on that, Carl, from the State
No,
House?
I just know that the governor signed it into law last week.
Yep, it was really exciting. And we also had positive news on the housing vouchers. They had a victory, too. Was anyone involved in any of that work? Ducia, were you involved in that?
Somewhat. Most of my friends were very involved in it.
And do you have any information on what the program is?
It's the alternative housing voucher program. It's something like a voucher for people with disabilities. I'm already losing it. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I know it got funded, so I know it was a positive thing. I don't have the details on it, but we can get information about that for our housing training, too, in the spring.
This is a voucher program?
Yes.
Yep, it's the alternative voucher housing program.
Yes.
And then just finally, I want to remind our members, if you haven't taken our accessibility priority survey yet, to take that. We have right around 250 responses. We're trying to get to 500. So please take the survey and pass the link on to your friends. And that's all from me. I don't know if there's questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next is the Architectural Access update from Patricia Mendez.
Oh, we have a question.
Good evening again. My name is Patricia Mendez. I'm the Architectural Access Specialist. I'm going to talk a little bit about our architectural access. I have a couple of exhibits that I'm going to share. I've been working with Meg Robertson from Massachusetts Commission for the Blind in a few projects that have to do with bike lanes and with pedestrians. One of the things that came into conversation is this book that has Braille information about the elements of the street, and we're studying, and we're going to try to implement in future drawings, future projects. We still don't know which ones and how, but this is one of the things that we're working on. So with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to pass the material.
I've seen it.
Patricia, is this also available online, this information?
I don't think so. This is one book that we're sharing with Transportation Department. It's not ours.
Oh,
When you say transportation, you mean MassDOT?
No, BTD, I believe.
Okay.
I don't think it's online because it's tactile. So it has each sign has a tactile description on it.
oh, I see. I was just thinking about like people with visual impairment who don't use tactile but contrast.
This conference contains less than 3 participants at this time. If you would like to continue, press *1 now.
I don't think so.
Is there anybody on the phone?
No.
No one called in. You can hang up, yeah.
Yeah, hang it up.
Thank you, Sarah. We've been having conversations with BTD, Boston Transportation Department, who are in charge of the Meinea cast, for example, and other projects in the city. And the thing that they have in common is that they're implementing bike infrastructure, and it's new for us, so we're trying to have the right dialogue and the right tools. So we're learning in this process, and this is one of the exciting materials that we got. And it's made by the Federal Highway Administration. So we wanted to share with you and have your thoughts and your input. Next, we worked with Boston Winter 2017, which is the event outside Boston City Hall Plaza. Last year, we had the experience with the chalets, and we had a couple of formal complaints. So this year, we're working with property department and with the proponents, Millennium Partners and TD North, to address those issues from last year's and correct the lessons learned from last year. This event is planning to come back next year, so we continue to work and to communicate with them. They went to the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board for variances this year, and they granted the variance. The variance was regarding the entrances to the chalet, that there's a change of level. So the Architectural Access Board granted the variance for this year with the condition of having communication early on, planning for fixing those deficiencies for next year. Next one, I attended the Access Advisory Committee for the MBTA, AACT, and they had the update from Judge King. Judge Patrick King had a public hearing to discuss the MBTA progress towards complying with the MBTA BCIL settlement. And on the back of the meeting agenda, I have a flyer with bullet point, and that is a summary of the information that was distributed there. Some of the highlights were the station access, Wollaston. It's going to be made accessible by summer, the 2019. Conceptual designs have been completed for all inaccessible subway and commuter rail stations, except Boylston and Bowdoin. An accessibility at the MBTA guide was released, and this guide is also in the website, in the MBTA website. So I encourage you to check it out. And it lists a lot of the projects that have been working on the last 6 months. So I encourage you to look into it. It's also in the website. And then Commissioner talked about autonomous vehicles, and this is very exciting projects for us. They came and they talked to us about potential points for drop-off, pickup in the Seaport district. So we're happy to make contact with them and to work with them and have input. This is very exciting for us. And we continue to work in the miscellaneous complaints and requests around the city for curb cuts, temporary ramps, fixing, and working with MassDOT for jurisdictional questions when it's not part of the city. We work on communicating with the responsible authority, and that includes the state. We've been successful at that so far. That's it for me. Any questions? Yes, Mr. Vieira, would you like to come up?
Well,
hold on.
Patricia, you're going to be here for the full meeting, right?
Yes.
Okay, so.
Yeah, just wait till, it'll just be a few more minutes, we're almost done.
Oh, I didn't realize it was from the public. We'll wait. Anybody from the commission?
Nope. No.
Okay, and I'll make sure we come back to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your patience. Next, we have the old business. Is there anybody, any old business that we need to bring up?
It just says accessible housing voucher, but we talked about that briefly.
That's what I thought. Okay. Next is new business. I believe that somebody on email said that they wanted to bring something up regarding housing, or was that already discussed as well?
Here's Ducia. The people who are applying to talk about are not available, but I am willing to speak on their behalf.
Okay, great. Anybody else
Do
have any?
do you want to speak now? Is that what you meant?
It's up to you. I can do it now.
You can speak now.
Yeah. All right. So Stacey. All right. So the issue is related to in housing to Rockland Towers in West Roxbury. The key points is it's from BHA elderly BHA elderly disabled buildings, and apparently there are some health issues surrounded about the construction of the buildings. They've been probably constructed maybe 20 years ago approximately, but there's something wrong, something with the walls, some dust coming from the ceilings, and some of the residents have been complaining about health issues related to the architecture of the building, and it apparently has not been properly addressed. And I was made aware of this and asked if there's any way the commission could maybe get involved, like ask what the issue is, if there's anything, how it can be improved.
Yeah, I think that individual case like that we can work on offline.
Okay.
And I think it's probably more office work rather than something the board would get involved with.
That's fine with me.
So we'll follow up with you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Any other new business from any of the commission members? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to public input, and I believe you had a question.
David.
David. Thank you. If you could go up to the microphone, please.
Thank you. David Vieira from Hyde Park, and I want to wish everybody a good holiday before I forget. Excuse me. I'm so excited about the ramp at the Boston Public Library. And Commissioner, rather than, well, let me say that a few weeks ago, I was pleasantly surprised when I got to the library and I saw it in place. And I was going to send you a thank you email, but I felt it more appropriate to thank you and the commission in person for getting that done. I will point out, and I hope I don't sound ungrateful, but there's a component that's still missing, and that's the sliding door. Because someone in a chair cannot independently get through that door as it presently stands, that swing door, without a great deal of difficulty. And I know the library doesn't throw away anything. So I think maybe that door may be down in their basement, and I'm wondering if you would consider reopening the conversation.
That's part of the plan.
Okay.
For the permanent temporary ramp.
Okay, I will say that that door was out of order more than it was in order sometimes, and every time I go through a CVS, I think of all the thousands of times that door opens and closes at CVS, and it never needs repairing. So I'd also like to thank Ms. Mendez for attending the AACT meetings. I see her there regularly because I am also there. And I have an issue with crosswalks in the city. I called the city a few weeks ago and spoke to the folks who handle crosswalks, and I'm going to use specifically the crosswalk in front of Back Bay Station that goes across to Copley Place. It's so worn out, you can't see it in the evening and the nighttime. And the answer I received was, well, we go around, we have different neighborhoods that we do, and we can't give preference to any one neighborhood over the other. They just go around the city geographically. But I really think there needs to be a flying team to go out and repaint crosswalks when someone calls in and says there's a definite need. For people with low vision, having well-striped crosswalks is essential to crossing some of our streets.
Usually the Public Works Department will work with us on those, or BTD.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, reach out to us, and then we can try to prioritize it.
That was...
It's not a guarantee, but they certainly listen to us.
Well, the work you did with the library ramp, Commissioner, I'm sure that we can get some crosswalks restriped. Thank you very much.
Because that's in front of an MBTA station, would the MBTA be responsible as well?
The city owns the streets, yeah.
It's a city walk.
Is there any other input from the public?
One more,
One more.
All right.
Yep.
one more.
Hey, good evening. My name is Jonathan Mosley. Thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. And Winston, thank you for the invitation. This is more of just a public awareness. We are in Avon, Massachusetts. We're going to be hosting an event called Night to Shine. It's sponsored by the Tim Tebow Foundation. It's a global event. Happens in about 500 locations. And what it is, it's a prom for students with special needs. And so we're hoping to have about 100 guests at the event, and we want to make it really special for the students. It's for students ages 14 and up. We'll have a red carpet as they enter. They'll have boutonnieres, dressages for the event. There'll be a crowning ceremony where every guest will have either a crown or a tiara. They'll be labeled the king and queen of the prom, a limo ride. I mean, it's kind of the works. Just want to make the night very, very special. This year it's in Avon, Massachusetts, but next year we're hoping to host it in Boston, Massachusetts. And so I just want to share that that event is happening, and if the board knows how to get the word out, so that
What's the date? What's the date?
The date is February 9th, which is a Friday night. From 6 to 9.
Do you have a flyer or any information you can?
You know,
give us?
I didn't bring any with me, but I would be happy to email it to anyone that's interested.
So could you email it to the disability office, and they can share it with the board, and we can then promote it that way?
I would love to.
All right.
And where is it in Avon? At a hotel?
It's actually called Grace Church. Mm-hmm. And then also for the following year, I would love to know of venues that would be that could possibly host it. It's going to be
we can
around
work with you on
300
that.
people.
Yeah, we can definitely work with you on that.
I appreciate that.
You might also want to let youth with disabilities know
Yeah,
about
do you
it.
know Partners for Youth with Disabilities, PYD?
No, ma'am.
Oh,
We can
but-
set you up with some resources.
Yeah.
Grab our card before you leave tonight, and we'll talk to you during the week.
All right, that'd be fantastic.
Great.
Thank you
That's
so
an
much.
awesome idea. I love it.
Oh,
I
thank you.
love it. That's
We're hoping
great.
it'll be a special night.
Have you been in touch with the Boston Public Schools at all?
A little bit. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been trying to nail down a venue in Boston, but it just didn't work this year. But
Is it for students from any school district?
from any school district, mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nice.
Well, thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other?
Don't think so. Nope.
No? Okay, I'm sorry, I wasn't paying. I was thinking about the Patriots game. Sorry.
Coming up soon.
So,
New business.
do we have any motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Any second?
A second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.